Thanks everyone for coming down to the Intelligent Health Pavilion to have a short discussion about voice assistants, digital assistants, and how they can have an impact on patient engagement. So, looking forward to it. My name's Geoffrey Parker. I'm head of healthcare development for Macadamian Technologies. Macadamian Technologies is a service company that creates digital products for other companies. So we're a design and development studio that help other people put together applications around new innovations, mobile applications, and we've started to see, well, to be honest, not started to see, we've had an interest in voice as an interface and as an application for a number of years. It started when Siri came out about 7 years ago. Siri came out onto the market, and we would get a lot of questions and a lot of conversation from people who are building new products saying, hey, I want to put voice in this, because that's really cool, and I want to make it like Siri. And that was a wonderful idea, and a lot of people got enthusiastic about it, but Siri was never built as a development platform. So integrating Siri into an application created, well, it just wasn't really possible. You could use it, you could leverage it a little bit, but it wasn't something that we could go and build into it. And then a couple of years ago, Alexa came out. And Alexa was a really big difference because it moved the conversation from, it's a similar digital assistant, but it moved from being just an assistant to a development platform. So all of a sudden, it's opened itself up to all of the opportunities for developers to get behind it, start creating their own digital experiences around voice, using the same natural language processing that Siri had introduced and gotten everybody used to. So this was a new innovation, and the second half of it that was really interesting was that it moved away from being attached to a device. It became omnipresent in the room around you. So no longer did I have to have any kind of interaction with a device. I can just speak. And that liberates people from a lot of the constraints that come with any kind of other application. And that's what makes voice interfaces and digital assistants such a really interesting and compelling proposition for new applications these days. And of course, now we have a plethora of new devices that have come out on the market that are kind of emulating this piece. So it's kind of a testament to the popularity of this space. Is it more than a gimmick? Good question. We have it's predicted that we're going to get about 50% of all voice searches or search happening on the internet by voice in the next few years. Most of the people, 3/4 of the people who own a voice-activated speaker use it daily. And 80% of the people that are looking at it have started to change their behavior to incorporate the digital assistant into their lives. So if we're looking at healthcare from a behavior change perspective, these devices are changing people's behavior already. So how do we attach a little bit to that so that we can start incorporating some of the therapeutic benefits into that behavior change? Because this is going to happen, and it's going to happen to pretty much everybody as we move forwards. Who uses them? A lot of young people, predominantly. Although there's a good proportion of people across the spectrum, and at the moment we're still mostly talking about early adopters of technology. Digital assistants haven't quite reached mass market yet, but yeah, there's a lot of strong growth, and young people fit in. There's also a little bit of an uptick in some surveys around elder people, but they're still predominantly using handheld devices, so things like Siri for their phone, to do more of their searching, rather than the omnipresent digital assistants. So where does this all fit into engagement? Well, we know that 80% of people are changing their routine around these devices. So how do we go and attach this into somebody's life and put it into a healthcare setting? Mostly it becomes another touch point. So we're not trying to say we want to replace the other applications that people are using. We still want to be using mobile, we still want to be using web applications. This just becomes another touch point where people can reach out to it and have a conversation that doesn't require them to do anything. You think about some of the challenges that we have today with medical applications. Every time you need to go and use it, you're logging into another application. Voice, we can use digital voice prints to identify people, so we can eliminate the need to log into applications just by using it through a voice interface. That's going to be a big time saver for a lot of people. Once the technology catches up, it's not quite there yet, but it's coming. It's a simpler, easier interaction for some things. It's not a solution for everything. We want to be able to get digital solutions so that we're interacting with it in a way that makes sense. And then when we've stopped getting value out of the audio interaction, we want to move to another platform. I'm sure everybody here has had an experience with an IVR system, calling their insurance company or something like that, where it's read 15 levels of menus to you and you're getting really frustrated with it. That's because presenting information, lists of information through an audio interface is painful. Don't do it. That's not what they're there for. But if I want to go and ask it to do something for me, go and take a note. Add something to my grocery list. Remind me to go and take my medication in 10 minutes. This is something that the digital assistant can do a lot easier for you than pulling out my mobile phone, going to the necessary application, finding where it is, entering the data with my thumbs, and then putting it away. So this is some of the value that we're going to see out of assistants. Another addition to that is once we start a conversation with our assistants, we can continue that conversation. So we might start in one area and say, hey, I need to book an appointment with something tomorrow, and then we can move off into another conversation. What are you doing for the next half an hour? We got a measurement from your blood glucose meter that says you're a little bit higher. Do you have time for a run? This will help bring your levels down, and you'll feel better for it. It can start having that as a conversation where it doesn't just start somewhere, but it continues into a new realm of discussion. So now I'm going to go through a few examples of some of the projects that Macadamian has been doing. And the first one we'll start with is My Diabetes Coach. My Diabetes Coach is a disease management platform designed for youth with type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. We enroll them into the system by their clinicians, and then we provide a physician-based application, a regular patient-based application that their parents can also access to monitor their treatment and their levels. And then we provide predominantly an Alexa-based skill to help the child interact with the application. So they're no longer in a position where they have to get out a mobile application, they have to sign into something to put in their details. They can just talk and have a natural conversation as if they were telling their parent, oh, here's what my reading was today. You can just tell this other system, it can capture it, then the clinician can see it, the parents can see it, and it can continue that dialogue to say, okay, now that we've captured this information, maybe there's a little bit more information we want to know. We've gotten to a point where the discussion around, hey, I'm outside of my target range at the moment. Is there anything you want to share about that? Okay, I'm in the middle of exams. I'm stressed. A couple of weeks later, back to see the physician, everything's back under control. You finish your exams, everything's walking along smoothly, and the physician's looking at data and says, okay, we were outside of a little bit here, everything's going along pretty well here. If we can see a pattern back over history that every time you're getting stressed, that you're moving off your treatment plan, we can start creating interventions that are specifically tailored towards that piece of your life. So there's an annotation of data that goes with the actual physical measurements. And that's one of the great opportunities that I see in voice. How does this system work? Well, there's lots of bits and pieces all plugged together. So there's the Alexa device, the Alexa skill, as it's working, interacting with the patient. They also have a range of different wearables that they can interact with. So we can monitor other things about, are you sleeping well at night? Are you getting enough exercise? What sort of things are you eating? How's your weight fluctuating? So that we can capture all of that information and bring it back together to try and create that intelligent conversation that people are looking forward to having with their device. And then we also marry it with the health-wise content so that we have clinically tested information for somebody to say, hey, here's some advice, here's some guidance on what you should be doing in these different situations. All of this we bring together with some technology that Macadamian's put together. It's Macadamian Hive, which is a platform for connecting to IoT devices, different measurement devices, and bring it all into a HIPAA-compliant environment. So that's one example. Here's another one that we put together for a large pharmaceutical company that was doing drug trials. Working on a large drug trial can be really, really good, but some drugs are for people who aren't well suited to inputting data into a traditional survey mechanism. So how do we try and create solutions that will help them input their data, their daily survey forms, in a mechanism that's a little bit easier for them to manage and capture that and bring that back into the trial process. So again, this has all the traditional pieces that we might have from a clinical application. There's mobile applications, there's cloud, there's the aggregation of data and bringing it all back together in a HIPAA-compliant back end. But we also added an Alexa skill that allows people to respond to their daily survey requirements to get that input. Because if we see a drop-off in the way people are responding to their formats, it can invalidate an entire trial. So this becomes a really useful way of just trying to increase that level of engagement. It's not replacing everything, but we're just trying to get a little bit of an uptick so that we're not, and that might be enough to get you over the finish line for your trial. This one here is a really interesting one. Alexa, as most people probably know, in fact, none of the platforms that are out there at the moment are HIPAA compliant. So you can't just go and sign up and say, okay, we're going to use this platform, we can just push all of our data through it. We need to do something a little bit more creative than that to try and make it fit within the construct. So for this particular project, we took Alexa and we have to treat it as an unsecured platform. We can't send any data through it that is going to be back and directly traceable to a patient. So it can't go onto your home Alexa. This is not a BYOD device solution. We look at custom devices going out to everybody that are then identified back to a patient at the point where it's in a compliant environment. So this was part of the ways that we've been able to work through some of the challenges to keep the anonymization of data or the matching of devices back to patients in a forum where it's secured. Here's another one, third one for today. In-home assistance for seniors. This was a project we did a little while ago that can initiate conversations with people. Traditionally, Alexa is designed to be a responsive unit. You start in a conversation with it, so you start the conversation, and then it can continue on from there. We did some work for this company to allow Alexa to initiate a conversation. So instead of waiting for it, it can actually greet you in the morning with a, hey, Bob, how did you sleep last night? And then you can continue the conversation from there. Or when you get your morning coffee, it can be the trigger to say, hey, when you're having your coffee in the morning, don't forget to take your medication. So there's a conversation that can go on there. And again, once the conversation starts, we can extend that conversation to cover a whole range of different topics and areas. There's been some really interesting studies, not from this particular project, but there's a organization out in California that did a study around Alexa for elderly care patients. And one of the things that they found was that at the start of the trial, there was a lot of people not quite sure whether this was the thing for them. They enrolled a group of patients, and from there, they started using the system. And by the end of the project, the number of people outside of the clinical trial, part of the project, had doubled. So there were so many other people who were liking what was happening in the trial that they were just coming on board and saying, okay, I want one of these for my house because this is adding value to my life. They did a survey at the end of it. 100% of the people said that Alexa made their life easier. 71% felt more connected to their family, friends, and community since the start of the Alexa pilot. Like these are results that are helping to change the way that people see digital assistants and bringing them into their lives, because at the end of the day, they're helping, they're adding value. There's some challenges with it. So Speaking works well for some elderly patients, but they also identified some areas where it's not working so well. So people who have hearing loss or hearing challenges as they're aging need a little bit more control over the treble and the bass mix of the different devices. So this is something that I expect we'll be seeing more of, especially as we start moving towards HIPAA-compliant solutions. So just a few design and development tips to kind of go along with some of the experience that we've had so far. Have a look at micro interactions, little things like, yes, great, thank you, yep, got that. Little things like that can help keep a conversation going, but you don't want one after every single interaction. Otherwise it becomes really awkward as a conversation with the device. If every time at the end of it says, thank you, Bob, I got that. It's like, we want to just mix them in periodically to help keep the conversation going. When we look at speech recognition, it still fails. It's not perfect. So we have to design that into the solution that we're providing. If we're having a human conversation, speech error rates are around 5%, and that's about the same level that we're getting out of these devices now. Expectations amongst users are that the device is smarter than that and that it's not going to get anything wrong. So there's a little bit of an expectation mismatch at the moment, but the actual error rates are very similar. The other challenge that we get is too often when there is an error or it doesn't understand something, it goes off on a wild tangent thinking that you did something else, instead of coming back and saying, hang on, I didn't quite catch that, or it didn't make sense to me, and getting you to repeat something. So trying to fail gracefully in how you handle some of those systems will make a much richer and more enjoyable user experience. Yeah, don't be afraid to set some challenges for people. You can use the digital agent to create a conversation and start challenging people. What can you do with this? Can you do a little bit better in these areas to move things forward? Some development tips. Mind maps are a great way to sort of map out a flow of conversation, but they're terrible for a developer to have to go back and implement. Developers are definitely thinking a lot more about task-based components. It's like, okay, implement this piece of the conversation, and then we'll move on to the next piece of the conversation. So you want to break those two down. Still useful to have mind maps, not necessarily something just to give straight to the development team. Try and create your lists of vocabulary. You want to keep consistency across the vocabulary as much as you can. Yeah, move on from there. And yeah, analytics. Like any application that we're building, we want to understand how people are using it. So build in your analytics from the beginning and expect that you're going to have to refine the application. It's not a once and done kind of solution. It's an evolution as people start using these machines. I started working in speech recognition probably about 15 years ago for a startup out of Silicon Valley. And one of the things that I learned over that period of time was that the machine is teaching me as much as I am teaching the machine. The interaction and the conversation that we have is teaching us how to speak to a machine, how to talk to it in a way that it can understand. And it's going to change the way that we communicate in a way that I think a lot of people haven't really anticipated yet. But it's coming, and that's okay. But we also want to know where it fails. And once it's failed, how do we recover from that? Do we need to repeat the question? Do we need to repeat the answer? Do we need to repeat both? Or are we off in a completely different direction? Trying to identify that within the speech conversation. Challenges, we covered some of these already. So HIPAA compliance is a challenge. I expect that's going to be solved, although nobody's officially announced it yet, in the not very distant future. The keynote speech from the start of the week, talking about omnipresent digital assistants sitting in the doctor's office, that has to be a HIPAA compliant solution. So all of the companies that are looking behind this, they're going to get there eventually. I don't know when, but I think it's going to be soon. And that's going to free up digital assistants to be used in a lot more settings and a lot more opportunities. We can still make it work, but you have to be a little bit careful about how you design and architect your system so that you're addressing the requirements of keeping that conversation piece private, and not designing your conversations so that you're exposing information. You don't want to say, hi, what's your name? Because now you've just put a patient name in the record. So you want to be a little bit structured, which creates sometimes a little bit of awkwardness. Once we get to HIPAA compliant digital assistants, a lot of that will go away and they'll be a lot smoother. Discoverability, most of the skills that are out there, nobody can find them. This is a problem across most of the app stores that are still there. It should get better. I think we'll also get improvements there, but I haven't seen anything specific about that. At the moment, if you're introducing somebody to a skill and you want to make that part of their engagement, plan for an onboarding program. Set up an expectation that, hey, we're going to have to do a little bit of training up front to get people familiar and comfortable with how their system works. And once they've done that, then monitor them to see, well, how do they really want to interact with it so that we can adapt and jump around. So just a quick summary. Voice is the new wave of interaction. Digital assistants will be pervasive everywhere in the not too distant future. So we need to start planning for that as being part of our interaction and experience. We can get a lot of really interesting metadata from a conversation that we can't get by just connecting a wearable. I can go and connect a wearable, I can get all the data in the world, but it's the metadata that goes with it that provides a lot of insight and value from a user's perspective. Conversational, don't stop at a point where I've said something and I've gotten a response. Make it into a conversation, because a conversation will tell you a lot more rich information than just do this, here's my response. And HIPAA compliance, as I mentioned, that should be coming in the not too distant future. Thanks very much, and any questions? No questions? All quiet? Oh. Thank you, almost. The accuracy? Yeah, about 95% accurate. So the value figures vary, but it's about 95, depending on which platform you're using and technologies, and it's been steadily increasing. So it's getting better and better. Natural language has brought a lot into trying to give the context around a conversation. It will continue, but it's hard going to get gains at that level. Is it dependent on accents, is the question? Yes, so different accents do have an influence on how people talk to things. A lot of the recognizers, so there's a number of different pieces that go into a speech recognizer. There's something that's doing the phonetic analysis, and then there's the language and conversational models behind it. So just doing the phonetic matching, those pieces are getting better. But then the next pieces of that are, not everybody talks in a strict language. So you hear things like Spanglish and things like that. It's a mix of different languages and conversations. So you have to be prepared that you're going to hear things when you start observing how people talk to a machine. And as you observe what that is, you'll start to understand, oh wow, there's a whole conversation. I didn't realize that people use this terminology. And if you can build that back into your application, you'll get a lot better responsiveness from it. Thank you. Another question?
We were talking about prompting users feedback from the next side instead of message. How does that work? Does it trigger the message?
Yeah, so how does it work? I can't officially say because that's proprietary to that client. Although there's a number of pieces done differently to how that particular piece works that have started putting together the building blocks for how you can do this. Yeah, you'd have to Google it. I'm sorry, I can't answer that at the moment. I think it's important to know that it's possible. And I think in the not too distant future, again, that'll be one of the new features that's coming to the recognition platforms.